I thought the house was quiet, but as I passed my daughter's room, I froze. Her voice was cold, steady, and terrifying. Make it look like an accident. He's worth 5 million dead. She was talking about me, her own father. I didn't confront her. Instead, I called the FBI. Before we start the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell icon so you never miss the next one. My name is George, and I spent most of my life believing that everything I did was for my daughter, Claire. From the moment she was born, I promised myself she would never struggle the way I did growing up. I worked long hours, built a company from the ground up, and saved every penny I could. Every birthday, every graduation, I made sure she had the best of everything. People would often tell me how close we seemed, how Claire's eyes lit up whenever I walked into a room. I carried those words like a badge of honor. I believed we were inseparable, that nothing could ever break the bond between father and daughter. But one night, that belief crumbled in the most brutal way. I was walking down the hall with a book in my hand, heading back to the study, when I heard Claire's voice through her bedroom door. At first, I smiled, thinking she was on the phone with her friend Megan, like she often was. But then the words that came out of her mouth stopped me cold. Make it look like an accident. He's worth 5 million dead. The book nearly slipped from my hand. My chest tightened so hard I thought I might collapse right there in the hallway. I pressed my back against the wall, my heart thundering in my ears. I wanted to believe I misheard, that she was rehearsing lines for some television show or a prank. But her voice was steady, serious, and chilling. She paused, then added, "No mistakes. Do it soon. I don't want to wait any longer." Every part of me went numb. She was talking about me, her own father, the man who had given up everything so she could have a perfect life. My legs trembled as I realized she was arranging my death like it was nothing more than a business deal. I didn't knock on her door. I didn't barge in and demand answers. Instead, I crept back into my study and shut the door softly behind me. My hands shook as I lowered myself into the leather chair, staring blankly at the desk where family photos of Claire as a little girl smiled back at me. I remembered the nights she used to crawl into my lap with a blanket, begging me to read her bedtime stories. I remembered her first bicycle, the skinned knees, the proud smile when she finally rode without training wheels. And now, this. $5 million. That was the insurance policy I had taken out years ago to protect her if anything happened to me. A safety net, I thought. Security for her future. I never imagined it would become the reason she wanted me dead. The house was silent, but in my mind her voice echoed like a blade. Claire, my daughter, my own flesh and blood, planning my murder. I sat in that chair for what felt like hours, though the clock on the wall told me it had only been minutes. My breathing was uneven, and I could feel sweat rolling down my back, even though the room was cool. Every memory I had of Claire flooded my mind. Her first day of school when she clung to my leg, the way she cried when her mother, Evelyn, passed away, the soft promises I made that I'd always protect her. Now those memories twisted into something I could barely stand to think about. Had I missed the signs? Was she always capable of this? Or had greed poisoned her heart over time? I reached for the framed photo on my desk, the one of Claire at her college graduation. She was smiling so brightly, holding her diploma in one hand and clutching my arm with the other. I remembered how proud I felt that day, how I told anyone who would listen that my daughter was going to change the world. Looking at it now, I felt a sharp pain in my chest. Maybe she did change, just not in the way I ever imagined. As I sat there, I replayed the words I had overheard. Make it look like an accident. Worth 5 million dead. It wasn't a misunderstanding. She had meant every single word. My first instinct was to storm into her room and demand the truth, but something inside me stopped. If she was planning something this calculated, confronting her would only tip her off. And if she really had someone ready to carry out her plan, then my life could end the moment she realized I knew. My hands shook as I reached for the phone. For a moment, I hovered over the keypad, thinking about dialing Claire's number and begging her to tell me it wasn't true. But I stopped. Instead, I thought of someone else, an old friend named Jack, a man I hadn't spoken to in years, but who once worked for the FBI. He had helped put away men who thought they were too smart to be caught, men who believed their crimes could be hidden. If there was anyone I could trust with something this dangerous, it was him. But before calling, I sat in silence, staring into the dark corners of my study, asking myself the question no father should ever have to ask. How do you prepare yourself to set a trap for your own child? The night passed slowly, every creak of the old house setting my nerves on edge. I barely slept, dozing off in the chair, only to wake at the faintest sound. When morning came, the sunlight creeping through the blinds brought no comfort. I moved carefully through the house, listening for Claire's footsteps upstairs. She came down just after 8, her hair neatly brushed, her voice cheerful as she greeted me with a smile, as if nothing at all had happened the night before. She poured herself coffee, humming a tune, and sat at the table. An ordinary day. But all I could hear was her whisper in the dark, "He's worth 5 million dead." I forced myself to nod at her, pretending nothing was wrong. "Morning," I said, my voice steady though my stomach churned. She glanced up at me briefly, then looked back at her phone, smiling faintly at whatever message appeared on the screen. For a moment, I thought she was texting the man I overheard her speaking to, confirming her instructions, maybe even arranging the time. My hands tightened around my coffee mug until I thought it might crack. When she finally left the house, tossing her purse over her shoulder and calling out that she'd be late because she had plans with friends, I knew it was my only chance. I locked the front door behind her, walked straight to my study, and picked up the phone. My hand hovered over the numbers for a moment, doubt and grief gnawing at me, but then I dialed. Jack answered on the second ring, his voice deep and steady, the same as it had been years ago. "George? Been a long time." I swallowed hard. "Jack, I need your help, and I don't have time to explain everything slowly. My daughter is planning to have me killed." There was silence on the line, then a sharp intake of breath. "You'd better tell me exactly what's going on," he said firmly. So I told him, every word I had overheard, every detail that still rang in my head like a hammer against steel. I described the tone of her voice, the way she had said it, calm and deliberate. Jack didn't interrupt. He listened until I finished, and then his voice came low and serious. "If what you're telling me is true, George, we don't just have a family problem here. We have a crime in motion, and if she's already reached out to someone, you may not have much time." I felt a chill run through me. "So what do I do?" Jack paused, then said words that set my heart racing even faster. "You let me handle it. We set up a sting, but you'll have to act like nothing's wrong until we're ready." Jack's words echoed in my head long after the call ended. "You'll have to act like nothing's wrong until we're ready." That was easier said than done. Pretending everything was normal when I knew my own daughter was plotting my death felt like walking across thin ice. One wrong step and I would go crashing down. But Jack's voice had been steady, calm, the way it always was back when we were younger. He wasn't the kind of man to panic. If he said there was a way to catch her, I had to believe him. That afternoon, Jack drove up to the house in an old gray sedan, nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention. He looked older than I remembered, his hair more silver than brown, but his eyes were sharp, the same as when he worked cases for the Bureau. The moment he stepped inside, he locked the door behind him and lowered his voice. "We'll treat this like any other sting. First, we confirm she's serious. Then, we get it on record. Once that's done, there's no way she can escape the consequences." I nodded, though my stomach twisted. "She sounded serious, Jack. Dead serious. I don't think this was just talk." He placed a hand on my shoulder. "Then we'll make sure the law hears it too. But you need to understand something, George. This won't be easy for you. You'll have to sit back and watch your daughter walk into the trap. That means hearing her say things that will cut you to pieces. You can't interrupt. You can't give yourself away. If she catches on, you'll be in more danger than before." I sank into the chair, rubbing my forehead. "You're asking me to watch my only daughter sell my life like I'm nothing but a number on a check. Do you know what that feels like?" Jack's eyes softened for a moment. "I know it's hell, but it's the only way." We spent the next hour going over the details. Jack explained that he would have one of his trusted contacts pose as the hitman Claire had been speaking to. The man was a retired agent who had done undercover work for years. He would arrange a meeting with her, act interested, and get her to repeat the details on tape. "Money, intent, and method," Jack said firmly. "We need all three. Once she says it, it's over." I agreed, though my heart ached with every word. He handed me a small recorder disguised as a regular pen. "Keep this on you whenever she's around. Even if she slips, even if she says something small, it's evidence." By the time Claire came home that evening, I had hidden the pen in my shirt pocket, forcing a smile as she walked through the door. She kissed me lightly on the cheek, just as she always did, and asked how my day had been. Her voice was warm, but I heard the coldness beneath it now, like ice hidden under water. I answered casually, careful not to let her see the tremor in my hands. All through dinner, she laughed at her phone, texting quickly before setting it face down on the table whenever I glanced her way. I knew she was making arrangements, but I had to act like I didn't notice. My appetite was gone, but I forced myself to eat, nodding along to her stories about friends I had never met. When she finally excused herself and went upstairs, I sat alone at the table, staring at her empty plate. My daughter, the same girl whose drawings I had once hung on the refrigerator, was plotting to trade my life for money. The ache in my chest was unbearable, but I had to swallow it. Jack's words circled in my mind. "Act like nothing's wrong." That night, as I lay awake in the dark, I heard the faint creak of her floorboards above me. She was pacing, whispering on the phone again. I couldn't catch the words this time, but I didn't need to. The plan was moving forward, and soon she would believe her hired man was ready. My heart broke with every step she took across that room, but I knew I had no choice. The sting was set in motion. The next morning started like any other, at least on the surface. Claire came down the stairs in a neatly pressed blouse, hair tied back, and that same bright smile she always wore. When she wanted me to believe nothing was wrong, she poured herself orange juice, asked if I wanted her to pick anything up from the store, and even laughed at something she read on her phone. To anyone else, she looked like the picture of a loving daughter, but to me, every smile, every word was another twist of the knife. I couldn't stop hearing her voice from 2 nights ago. "Make it look like an accident. He's worth 5 million dead." I nodded at her and pretended to read the newspaper, though my eyes never once focused on the print. The pen recorder Jack had given me sat tucked in my shirt pocket, a silent witness to every word spoken across the table. When Claire stood up and kissed me on the cheek before leaving, I forced myself to stay calm, to smile back, even though my chest felt tight with dread. The moment the front door clicked shut, I reached for the phone. Jack answered quickly, his voice low and controlled. "She's ready to move," he said before I could even ask. "My contact, the one who'll play the hitman, received a message from her this morning. She's setting up a meeting." My throat went dry. "When?" "Tonight," Jack said. "She wants to meet in person. She's offering him a down payment to make sure you don't live long enough to spend another birthday." Hearing those words spoken aloud made me grip the edge of the table so hard my knuckles whitened. I had expected this, but the reality of it nearly crushed me. My own daughter was walking into the kind of deal that could never be undone. Jack continued, steady and firm. "George, this is the moment we've been waiting for. My man will wear a wire and we'll be close by. Once she says the words, money, accident, your name, we'll have her. But until then, you need to stay calm. Don't let her see even a flicker of suspicion." That afternoon dragged on like a lifetime. I walked around the house, touching old photographs of Claire as a little girl, her gap-toothed smile at age 6, her hand clutching a stuffed bear, her prom night picture, where she looked like her mother, Evelyn, so radiant, I almost cried. I whispered to myself, asking how the little girl in those photos could have grown into someone planning to have me killed, but no answer came, just silence. When When Claire came home later, she acted as though everything was normal. She asked what I wanted for dinner, joked about one of her friends, even offered to help fold laundry. I studied her face carefully, looking for any sign of guilt, but she was flawless. Her lies had become her mask, and she wore it so well that if I hadn't overheard that call, I might have believed she was the same sweet daughter I once knew. After dinner, she slipped out, again saying she was meeting Megan, but I knew better. My heart raced as I watched her car pull out of the driveway. The sting was about to unfold. Jack called 10 minutes later. His voice was low, tense. She's heading to the cafe downtown. My contact's already there waiting. We're setting up outside with surveillance. This is it. I stood at the window, watching the empty driveway, gripping the phone until my hands shook. Part of me wanted to scream, to run after her, to shake her and demand she tell me why. But I stayed where I was. Jack had been right. This was the only way. If I confronted her now, she'd lie, deny, maybe even vanish. But with evidence, there would be no denying what she had become. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the streetlights flickered on, I sat in that silent house, every tick of the clock hammering at my nerves. Somewhere across town, my daughter was meeting the man she believed would kill me, and I could do nothing but wait. The house felt heavier that evening than it ever had before. I sat in the living room with the lights off, staring out at the dark street. My hand rested on the phone, waiting for Jack to call with updates. The silence was unbearable, broken only by the ticking of the old clock on the mantel. Every sound seemed louder than usual. The hum of the refrigerator, the settling creak of the floorboards, even my own shallow breaths. My daughter was out there right now, meeting the man she believed would end my life. It was almost too much to bear. Finally the phone buzzed. Jack's voice came through low but steady. "She's here. She just walked into the cafe. My man is inside, already wired. We're recording everything." I closed my eyes, pressing a hand against my forehead. "Jack, I don't know if I can stand hearing what she's about to say." "You don't have to," he replied firmly. "I'll listen. You just stay where you are and stay calm. We'll handle the rest. Trust me, George. This is for your safety and for the truth." But even as he said it, I strained to imagine the scene. Claire, sitting across from a man she thought was a killer, casually planning my death as if she were ordering a coffee. My chest ached. I could almost hear her voice, calm and confident, giving details like she had practiced them. Jack kept the line open, his whispers feeding me fragments. "She's smiling, acting friendly. She just handed him an envelope. Cash inside. She's saying you take morning walks near the park. She's suggesting it would be easy to tamper with your car brakes. Now she's laughing about how no one would suspect a thing." My stomach turned violently. I gripped the arm of the chair so hard my nails dug into the leather. The child I had raised, the little girl I once carried on my shoulders at the county fair, was sitting somewhere across town, plotting which method would make my death look the most tone even but grim. "She's very clear about it, George. She just said, 'He's worth 5 million dead.' I want it fast. I don't want to wait. She's putting it all on the record. Money, motive, method. We've got everything we need." I didn't speak. My throat was too tight, my chest too heavy. I thought of Evelyn, my late wife, and what she would say if she could see this. She had always been softer than me, always defending Claire no matter what. I imagined her face, filled with heartbreak, and I felt the same pain deep in my bones. Jack's voice dropped even lower. "We'll give her a little more time, then we'll move in." The minutes that followed felt like hours. My hands trembled as I thought of Claire's smile, the way she must have looked sitting across from the agent. Was she nervous? Excited? Did she feel guilt? Or had greed swallowed her whole? The girl who once cried when she lost a pet goldfish was now paying someone to take her father's life. Then Jack's tone sharpened. "It's done. We're moving now. George, listen to me carefully. Stay put. She'll be in custody within minutes." My breath caught. I sat, frozen, staring into the dark room. The image of my daughter in handcuffs filled my mind, and I couldn't decide if it felt like justice or tragedy. Perhaps it was both. When the call ended, I sat in silence, my eyes burning but no tears falling. Across town, Claire was being taken into custody, her betrayal recorded for all to hear. But here in the house we once filled with love and laughter, I was left alone with a truth that felt heavier than any prison bars could ever be. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed in the armchair, staring at the wall until the sky outside shifted from black to gray. My body felt drained, but my mind refused to rest. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Claire's voice again, flat, cold, businesslike, handing my life away for a pile of money. I wondered if she felt any guilt at all when the agents moved in, when the cuffs clicked around her wrists. Was there fear, shame, or just anger that she had been caught? By mid-morning, Jack called. His tone was measured, professional, but beneath it I could hear the weight of what he had witnessed. "She's in custody," he said. The whole conversation was recorded, every detail. She made the deal clear as day. There's no escaping this now. I gripped the phone tighter. "Where is she?" "She's being held downtown. They'll question her formally today." The hallway, her voice singing upstairs when she was little. Now those same memories felt poisoned. By afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. I called Jack back and told him I wanted to see her. I had to. When I arrived at the station, the fluorescent lights stung my eyes. Jack met me at the door and guided me down a long corridor that smelled faintly of disinfectant and old paper. At the end of the hall was a small room with a single table. Behind the glass wall, I saw her, my daughter. Claire sat with her hands cuffed in front of her, her hair pulled back roughly, her face pale but her eyes sharp. When she saw me, her lips curled into something between a smirk and a sneer. It was not the expression of a child ashamed before her father. It was the face of someone angry at being caught. They brought me inside, and for a long moment neither of us spoke. I sat across from her, my hands trembling slightly on the table. Finally, she broke the silence. "This is ridiculous," she said flatly. "They set me up. You know I'd never hurt you." The words cut deep. Not because I believed them, but because I could see the lie so plainly in her eyes. She wasn't begging for forgiveness. She was trying to manipulate me, just as she had tried to manipulate everyone else. "I heard you, Claire," I said quietly, my voice raw. "Every word. I know what you planned." For the first time, her composure faltered. A flash of panic crossed her face before she quickly masked it with anger. "You don't understand," she snapped. "You've always had control over everything, the money, the business, my life. I just wanted what's mine. It was supposed to be mine." I felt my chest tighten, not from fear but from heartbreak. "You weren't trying to take what's yours," I whispered. "You were trying to take me, and I gave you everything already. More than you'll ever know." She turned her face away, biting her lip, refusing to meet my eyes. In that moment, I realized she wasn't going to break down. She wasn't going to apologize. Claire was too far gone into whatever darkness had taken hold of her. The guards led her out, her eyes burning with fury rather than remorse. As the door closed, I sat there, feeling older than I ever had in my life. The daughter I had loved, the girl I had raised, was gone. What remained was someone I could barely recognize. Jack walked in quietly and placed a hand on my shoulder. "It's done, George. The courts will handle the rest. She won't hurt you now." But his words felt hollow, because what haunted me most wasn't the danger she posed. It was the question that would never leave me. How does a father ever come to terms with the fact that his own child wanted him dead? The days that followed were a blur of police reports, court documents, and questions I never imagined I would have to answer. Neighbors began whispering before I even had the chance to tell them the truth. They saw the patrol cars parked outside, the detectives coming and going, and they drew their own conclusions. Soon the story was out. My daughter had been arrested for plotting my murder. I could feel the weight of every glance when I walked down the street, the pity in some eyes, the judgment in others. It was the kind of scandal that spread like fire in a small town, and I was at the center of it. I tried to keep myself busy, anything to stop my mind from circling back to her voice on that phone call. I went into the workshop, the garage, even the garden, but everywhere I turned, I saw traces of her. The tulips she and Evelyn had planted one spring, the old swing set rusting quietly in the yard where she used to spend hours laughing, the faint pencil marks on the wall in the hallway where I had measured her height year after year. It all mocked me now, a reminder that the same girl who once clung to my hand with trust had sat in a cafe plotting my end. Court proceedings moved fast. Jack kept me informed every step of the way. The prosecution had more than enough evidence: the taped conversation, the money she handed over, and the detailed instructions she gave. When I sat in the courtroom and listened to them play her voice aloud, describing how she wanted it to look like a car accident, I felt my insides twist. There was no denying it. Every juror heard it. Every spectator sat in stunned silence. It was her voice, cool and steady, talking about my death like she was arranging for groceries to be delivered. Claire sat across the room at the defendant's table, expressionless. When the tape played, she didn't cry. She didn't hang her head. She simply stared straight ahead, as if none of it mattered. That hurt worse than the words themselves. At least if she had shown guilt or shame, I could have believed that some part of my daughter still remained. But the blankness in her eyes told me the truth. She was gone, replaced by greed and anger I had never seen in her as a child. The trial drew people from all over town. I caught whispers as I walked past them. "Can you believe a daughter would do that? Poor George, after everything he did for her. $5 million, unbelievable." I didn't want their sympathy. I didn't want their gossip. I wanted my daughter back, the little girl who once sat on Evelyn's lap with ribbons in her hair and asked me if we would always be together. But wanting didn't change the truth. One night, after a particularly long day in court, I came home and sat at the kitchen table with a bottle of whiskey untouched in front of me. I didn't drink. I never had. But I thought about it, anything to numb the ache. Instead, I opened the drawer where Evelyn had kept her old journals. She had been gone for years, but her handwriting still carried warmth. On one page, I found something she had written during Claire's "Too easy. I hope life doesn't turn her bitter." Reading those words sent a chill through me. Evelyn had seen the signs even then. Maybe I had been blind. Maybe I had wanted so badly to believe Claire was perfect that I ignored the cracks in her character. That guilt pressed down on me harder than anything else. The verdict came swiftly. Guilty. The judge's voice echoed through the courtroom, sentencing her to years behind bars for solicitation of murder. I should have felt relief, knowing I was safe, that justice had been served. But when they led her away in cuffs, her eyes locked on mine. For the first time since her arrest, I saw something other than anger, pure hatred. It was like she blamed me for trapping her, as if I had forced her to make the choice she made. That look followed me home that night. I sat in the silent house, Evelyn's journal still open on the table, and I realized justice didn't always bring peace. Sometimes it only left behind scars. After the trial ended and the courtroom emptied, the world didn't magically return to normal. In some ways, the hardest part began after the gavel struck. The house, once full of memories and warmth, now felt like a hollow shell. I walked through the rooms in silence, each corner echoing with ghosts of the past. The photo frames on the mantel were the worst. Pictures of Claire as a baby, her chubby hands reaching for Evelyn's face. Claire as a teenager, smiling with braces. Claire at her graduation, her arm linked proudly with mine. I couldn't bring myself to take them down, but I also couldn't bear to look at them for long. The town had already moved on to the next gossip, but the weight of whispers lingered whenever I stepped outside. At the grocery store, people looked at me with pity, their voices dropping as I passed. At church, neighbors shook my hand a little too firmly, their eyes searching for words they couldn't find. Some offered condolences, as if I had buried my daughter, and in truth, it felt like I had. Others avoided me altogether, uncomfortable with the idea that such betrayal could happen so close to home. I tried to throw myself into routines. I cooked simple meals, walked the same route through the park each morning, and tinkered in the garage where old tools gathered dust. But even the smallest tasks reminded me of Claire. She used to sit at the kitchen counter as a child, swinging her legs and asking questions about everything under the sun. She used to run ahead of me in the park, turning to wave with that radiant smile. Those memories, once sweet, had soured into reminders of everything I had lost. Jack visited often, checking in on me. He'd bring coffee, sit at the kitchen table, and talk about ordinary things. Baseball, the weather, the news. Called, you wouldn't be here? She made her choice? I nodded each time, but inside his words twisted like a knife. I knew he was right, yet part of me couldn't help but wonder if I had failed her long before that night. Had I spoiled her too much? Had I given her so much that she stopped valuing anything, even life? Evelyn had worried she wanted too much, too fast, and I had brushed it off. Now those words echoed louder than ever. Loneliness set in deeper with each passing week. Nights were the worst. I'd sit in the living room with only the hum of the refrigerator breaking the silence. Sometimes I thought I heard footsteps upstairs, just as I used to when Claire was home late. Sometimes I even caught myself calling her name, before the crushing reminder returned that she wasn't here, at least not in the way she once was. One evening I received a letter from her prison. My hands shook as I tore it open, half hoping for an apology, half dreading the venom I suspected would spill across the page. The words inside were cold. She wrote that she hated me for betraying her, that I had ruined her life, that I had chosen my own survival over her happiness. There wasn't a single word of regret, no admission of guilt, just rage and blame. I folded the letter carefully and tucked it into Evelyn's journal. I didn't throw it away. Somehow, I couldn't. Maybe some part of me still hoped that one day there would be another letter, one written with remorse instead of hate. But until then, I carried the weight of knowing my daughter had chosen greed over love, money over family. That night, I sat alone in the kitchen with the lights dimmed and whispered into the silence, "I don't know if I lost you to the world or if I lost you to myself." The house gave no answer, only the creak of settling wood and the ticking of the clock. The weeks stretched into months, and though the noise of the trial faded from the town's lips, the storm inside my chest never settled. Each day felt like a battle just to rise from bed, to pour coffee, to pretend I still belonged in a world that had cracked wide open beneath my feet. The house seemed to grow larger and emptier all at once. Sometimes I caught myself setting 2 plates at the table, an old habit from when Claire lived here, before quickly pushing one back into the cupboard as if I had made a mistake too shameful to admit. I spent long hours sitting in the garden, a patch of earth Evelyn had adored. Her roses still bloomed each spring, stubborn and beautiful, climbing along the wooden trellis she had painted years ago. I tended them carefully, not because I loved them the way she had, but because it felt like the last thread tying me to her. When I clipped the faded blooms, I heard her voice in my head, gentle and warm. "Everything you love needs care, George. Don't ever forget that." It was during one of those afternoons, while I sat with dirt still on my gloves, that Pastor Williams from church stopped by. He was a tall man with kind eyes, someone who had known Evelyn well. He didn't mention Claire directly, but his words danced around it. "The hardest storms, George," he said softly, "are the ones that don't end with the thunder. They're the ones that keep rumbling inside long after the rain has stopped. You have to decide whether you'll live under those clouds or whether you'll step into the light that's still waiting." I wanted to believe him, but I didn't know how. How could I step into the light when my own child had chosen to bury me in the dark? Not long after, Jack urged me to attend one of the community meetings at the town hall. "Get out of the house," he said. "You can't sit in that place forever, George. You need people." I resisted at first, but eventually I went, mostly to stop his nagging. That night, sitting in a circle of folding chairs beneath the harsh glow of fluorescent lights, I listened to people talk about their struggles, losing jobs, battling illness, caring for aging parents. Their pain was different from mine, but it was pain all the same. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel completely alone. After the meeting, a woman named Margaret approached me. She was raising her 2 grandsons on her own after her daughter had fallen into addiction. "I know it's not the same as what you've been through," she said gently, "but I understand what it feels like to lose someone before they're truly gone." Her words sank deep into me. She wasn't pitying me. She was sharing a wound of her own. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized that maybe Pastor Williams was right. Maybe the only way forward was to stop waiting for an answer that would never come from Claire, and instead pour my strength into something that still mattered. Evelyn had spent her life giving, to me, to Claire, to everyone around her. Maybe I could honor her by doing the same. The very next morning, I walked into the community center and signed up to volunteer. It wasn't much at first, stacking chairs, sweeping floors, fixing old shelves, but it gave me purpose. The laughter of children running through the hallways reminded me of a time when my own home had been full of that sound. Their voices filled a silence that had grown unbearable. One afternoon, while repairing a broken bench outside the center, I thought of Evelyn again. She had always believed in second chances, in helping those who had stumbled. And though I knew Claire may never ask for forgiveness, never accept responsibility, I felt a strange calm in knowing that I could still live in a way that would make Evelyn proud. The betrayal still burned inside me, but it no longer defined every moment. Slowly, carefully, I was learning to stand in the light again, even while carrying the shadow of what had happened. Life at the community center gave me something I hadn't felt in a long while: purpose. The days had structure again. I painted walls, repaired loose tiles, and even helped the children with their schoolwork when they needed it. Their laughter filled the air, their questions tumbled out one after another, and for those hours I could almost forget the emptiness waiting at home. Still, when I returned each evening to the silent house, the weight of what had happened crept back in. I would pause at the staircase, half expecting to hear Claire's voice calling down, before reminding myself those echoes belonged to another life. It was on a rainy afternoon in early spring that the letter came. The envelope was stamped with the prison's return address, the handwriting neat but strangely hesitant. My hands trembled as I carried it into the study. I laid it on the desk and stared at it for what felt like hours, afraid of what I might read inside. The last letter from her had been full of venom and blame. I wasn't sure my heart could take another. Finally, I tore it open. The first line stopped me cold. "Dad, I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to hear me out." The words were different this time. There was no anger, no accusations. Instead, there was a strange mixture of sorrow and desperation. Claire admitted she had been consumed by greed, that she had convinced herself the money would solve all of her problems. She wrote about how she had felt trapped in the shadow of my success, how envy had grown inside her until it twisted into something darker. She didn't excuse it, at least not outright, but she painted a picture of someone lost, someone who had believed money could replace love. I read the letter twice, then a third time. Her words pulled me in two directions. On one hand, there was a flicker of the daughter I remembered, the little girl who once left notes on my desk saying, "I love you, Daddy." On the other hand, I couldn't ignore the truth. She had tried to end my life. Could a letter change that? Could any apology erase what she had done? At the bottom of the page, she had written, "I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know if I can be saved, but I wanted you to know I still think of you every night. Even if you never write back, please don't forget that I was once your daughter before I became this." I sat there for a long time, the paper shaking in my hands. Part of me wanted to burn the letter, to refuse her words the space to linger in my home. Another part of me wanted to clutch it to my chest, proof that somewhere inside the woman who betrayed me, a piece of the child I had loved still remained. That night I brought the letter out to the garden and read it aloud among Evelyn's roses. The rain had stopped and the petals glistened with drops of water. I imagined Evelyn standing beside me, her hand on my arm, her voice gentle as always. "Don't close your heart completely, George," I could almost hear her say, "but don't let it break you again." I didn't sleep much after that. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the letter folded on the nightstand. I thought about forgiveness, about whether it was something I owed to Claire, or whether it was something I needed for myself. But forgiveness and trust were not the same, and I wasn't sure I could ever trust her again. The following morning I placed the letter in Evelyn's journal beside the first one. Two very different voices from the same daughter, one filled with hatred, the other dripping with sorrow. And I realized that perhaps this would be my life now, forever caught between the memory of the girl I raised and the reality of the woman she had become. Still, for the first time since the trial, I felt something stir in me. Not hope, not exactly, but a question. If Claire truly meant what she had written, was there a chance, however small, that she could change? The days after that letter weighed on me heavier than I could explain. I carried it folded in my pocket, touching it every so often as if the paper itself might give me an answer. At the community center, while the kids laughed and played, I caught myself staring at the words in my mind. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to hear me out." Sometimes I felt my heart soften, as if I could still see the little girl who used to run into my arms after school. Other times, anger boiled up again, reminding me that the same girl had sat across from a stranger and traded my life for a promise of money. At night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Evelyn's journal open beside me. I wanted her guidance more than ever. I flipped through the pages she had written in her neat, looping hand. There were notes about grocery lists, recipes, prayers for Claire's future. On one page she had written, "No matter how far she drifts, I pray she remembers love always waits for her." Those words made my chest ache. Evelyn had always believed people could find their way back, even from the darkest places. But could I risk believing the same about Claire? I thought about writing back. The pen rested on the desk for days, but every time I picked it up, I froze. What could I even say? "I forgive you?" That wasn't true. "I hate you?" That wasn't true either. The truth was far messier, tangled in years of love, disappointment, sacrifice, and betrayal. So I waited, and the waiting gnawed at me. One evening after locking up the community center, Margaret, the grandmother raising her grandsons, walked with me to the parking lot. She glanced at me and asked softly, "Did you ever get another letter from her?" I must have looked surprised, but she smiled faintly. I figured you would. People like that, they can't help but reach back when silence sets in. Paper. Change is harder to live. Her words stuck with me the whole drive home. That night, I sat in the kitchen with the letter spread open in front of me. I poured myself a cup of coffee, though it grew cold, untouched. I stared at her words, searching for sincerity between the lines. Did she mean it? Or was this just another form of manipulation, another mask? After all, Claire had been clever enough to play the role of the perfect daughter for years, while hiding resentment in her heart. Still, something inside me whispered that silence might be as dangerous as words. If I ignored her completely, would she sink further into bitterness? If I answered, would I be feeding her false hope? My hands shook as I picked up the pen, but once again, I froze. I couldn't bring myself to write a single word, not yet. Instead, I folded the letter and tucked it back into Evelyn's journal. I placed the book on the nightstand and stared at it before turning out the light. "Help me know what's right," I whispered into the empty room, as if Evelyn could still hear me. The following week at the community center, something unexpected happened. A young girl named Anna, no older than 12, tugged on my sleeve while I was repairing a shelf. "Mr. George," she asked shyly, "why don't you ever smile?" The question struck me like a hammer. I looked down at her small face, so full of innocence, and realized how much of myself I had hidden away under the weight of betrayal. That night as I walked home, I thought of Claire again. I thought of how once she had been like Anna, curious, innocent, full of life. Something had changed her, bent her into someone I no longer recognized. But if children like Anna could grow into something better with enough love and guidance, maybe, there was still a chance, however small, that Claire could too. I didn't have the answer yet, but I knew the decision of whether to respond to her letter was no longer just about her. It was about me, about whether I was willing to let bitterness define the rest of my days, and that was a question I couldn't avoid forever. For weeks, the question gnawed at me like a dull blade. Should I answer her letter or let silence be my only reply? Every morning I would see the journal resting on the nightstand, Claire's words folded neatly between Evelyn's pages. Sometimes I reached for it before I even had my coffee, reading the same sentences over and over until the ink blurred in my tired eyes. "I don't know if I can be saved, but I wanted you to know I still think of you every night." The community center kept me busy during the day, but the nights stretched long and heavy. I would sit by the window, the house quiet except for the ticking of the old clock, and imagine Claire in her cell. Did she lie awake staring at the ceiling worse than the betrayal itself? One evening, after supper, I decided I couldn't keep circling the same thoughts forever. I pulled Evelyn's journal closer, unfolded Claire's letter, and laid a blank sheet of paper beside it. My hand hovered over the pen for a long time. I wasn't writing to forgive her, that word was too heavy, too final, but perhaps I could write to remind her of something beyond money, beyond greed, something Evelyn had always believed in, that people are more than their worst mistake, but only if they choose to change. My words came slow, halting, scratched across the paper like they weighed more than ink should. "Claire, I don't know who you are anymore. The daughter I raised is not the woman who sat in that cafe. But I also know people can lose their way. If your regret is real, prove it with your actions, not your letters. I can't promise forgiveness, and I can't promise trust, but I can promise I won't stop hoping that one day you'll remember who you used to be." I read it 3 times before folding it, slipping it into an envelope and addressing it to the prison. My hands shook as I dropped it into the mailbox the next morning. The clatter of the metal slot closing echoed louder than it should have. I walked home with my chest tight, unsure if I had done the right thing, or if I had just opened the door to another kind of pain. Weeks passed before a reply came. Another letter, the handwriting still hers, but shakier this time. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside, her tone was different again. She wrote of sleepless nights, of hearing my voice in her dreams, of remembering childhood moments she hadn't thought about in years. Christmas mornings, family picnics, Evelyn's laugh filling the house. "For the first time, I feel the weight of what I've done," she wrote. "Not just the crime, but the way I destroyed everything you gave me. I don't know if I'll ever deserve another chance, but I want to try. Please don't stop writing. It's the only thing keeping me from disappearing completely." Reading it, I felt a strange mix of grief and hope. Was it possible that she was beginning to see the truth? Or was this another mask, another way to keep me tethered to her, still believing? That night I sat in the garden beside Evelyn's roses, the letter in my lap. The sky was dark, the stars faint above, and the air smelled faintly of damp soil. I whispered into the night as if Evelyn could hear me. "If she means this, if she truly wants to change, give me the strength to face it, and if she doesn't, give me the strength to walk away." The roses swayed gently in the breeze, offering no answer, only silence. But somehow I felt a little less alone. The letters became a quiet rhythm in my life. Every week or so, an envelope arrived from the prison, stamped and marked by the system, yet holding the voice of the daughter I once knew. Some filled with regret for what she had done. Other days they wavered, slipping into anger or self-pity, as if she couldn't decide whether to blame herself or blame me. I never knew what version of Claire I would find when I tore open those envelopes, but still, I read every word, and carefully, I wrote back. I didn't write long letters, just enough to answer her questions, to remind her of memories that mattered. I told her about the roses in the garden, how they bloomed brighter that spring than I had ever seen before. I told her about the children at the community center, how their laughter reminded me of the way she used to laugh when she was young. I even told her about Evelyn's journal and how her words still guided me. I kept my letters simple, honest, but never careless. I didn't give promises I couldn't keep. I never said I forgave her. I only reminded her of the life she had once been part of, the love she had once known. Months passed this way, and for the first time since the trial, I began to feel something close to balance. But then, one letter came that shifted everything again. "Dad, I've been meeting with a counselor here," she wrote. "He says I need to face the people I've hurt. I want to ask you for something I don't deserve. Will you visit me? Not through glass, in person. I need to see you, not just your words on paper." I read that line over and over, my heart twisting each time. Visiting her meant walking back into the same room where I had seen her in cuffs, staring at me with hate. It meant opening myself to a face-to-face confrontation with the person who had wanted me dead. But it also meant testing whether her words were real, whether the regret I read on paper was more than ink. For days I couldn't decide. At the community center, Margaret noticed my distraction. "What's troubling you?" she asked gently one evening as we stacked chairs. When I told her, she studied me for a long moment before saying, "You'll never know what's in her heart if you hide from it. But be careful, George. Hope can heal you, but it can also break you all over again." That night I sat with Evelyn's journal in my lap, flipping to the page where she had written, "Love always waits." I whispered into the silence, "But how long should it wait, Evelyn? How much should it risk?" The following week I signed the forms and arranged the visit. My hands shook as I handed them to the prison clerk, but there was no turning back. When the day arrived, I drove out to the facility under a sky the color of slate. The guard led me down a long corridor, the sound of heavy doors clanging open and shut behind us. My heart pounded harder with every step. And then, there she was, Claire, sitting at a plain metal table, no glass between us this time. She looked thinner, older somehow, but her eyes lit up when she saw me. "Dad," she whispered, her voice breaking for the first time in years. Didn't answer right away. I studied her face, searching for the truth beneath the words of her letters. Was there sincerity in her eyes, or was it another mask? Finally, I sat across from her. My hands trembled, but I folded them on the table and forced myself to meet her gaze. "I'm here," I said quietly. "Now tell me why." The room went silent except for the faint buzz of the overhead lights. I could feel the weight of everything between us. The betrayal, the anger, the regret, the love that still refused to die. And for the first time I realized this visit would not just test her. It would test me too. For a long moment neither of us spoke. Claire's eyes shimmered, not with the sharp defiance I had seen in the courtroom, but with something softer, something I wanted to believe was real. She clasped her hands together tightly, her knuckles pale. "I know I don't deserve this," she whispered. "I know I lost the right to call myself your daughter the day I tried to take everything from you. But when you kept writing back, when you reminded me of things I thought I'd forgotten, I realized I threw away the only love I ever had." Her words hung in the air, heavy and raw. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that buried beneath all the greed and bitterness, there was still a piece of the girl Evelyn and I had raised. But trust is not a switch you flip back on. It is a slow, fragile thing, and mine had been shattered. "I'm not here because of your counselor," I said slowly. "I'm here because I needed to see if the woman sitting in front of me is still my daughter, or if she's gone for good." Claire's voice cracked as she leaned forward. "I don't know who I am anymore, Dad, but I want to try. I don't want money. I don't want excuses. I just don't want to disappear without you remembering me as more than what I did." Silence stretched between us, broken only by the hum of the fluorescent lights. I searched her eyes, looking for the truth, and for the first time, I saw something that hadn't been there before. Not anger, not manipulation, but fear. Fear of herself, fear of losing the last thread tying her to family. "I can't forgive you today," I said finally. My voice shook, but it was steady enough. "And I don't know if I ever will. But I can sit here, right now, and give you one thing: the chance to prove through your actions that you mean what you've just said. Words don't heal, choices do." Her tears spilled freely then, and she nodded, pressing her cuffed hands against her face. I didn't reach across the table. I couldn't. Not yet. But for the first time since that night, I overheard her voice in the hallway. I didn't feel only betrayal. I felt that either. That, for now, was enough. Driving home, the road stretched quiet under the fading sunset. The roses in the garden would need trimming soon, and the community center would need my hands again tomorrow. My life was not whole, and maybe it never would be, but it was still mine to live, and as long as it was, I would choose to honor the love I once knew, even if the person who shared it with me had lost her way. If you believe justice and second chances can exist side by side, then please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support helps bring more stories like this to light. Thank you for watching.